fraud and financial crimes increase around the festive season as consumers spend more during this time. Technology has made going cashless a little bit more convenient, allowing consumers to use digital means of payment through their phones. But question is, how safe is tap and go? Let's discuss this a little bit now, and I'm joined by Richard Frost, the head of consulting at Armata CyberSecurity. Richard, thank you so much for the time. I know that it's not just the phone, right? We even put it on some of our smartwatches as well, and we just tap and go with that. And we're thinking to ourselves, man, it just means that I have to carry less. And it's just so helpful. And that's the whole point of technology. I thought that was the whole point. It's just supposed to make things helpful. But in this case, it could still be dangerous. Let's talk about the dangers here.
Yeah, good afternoon, Arabile. I think the danger is more on the actual card itself, the tap and go function on the card. We advocate actually using more the digital wallets, especially if you're using it on a phone where you have some form of biometric to actually activate the card function. The advantage of the card function on the phone as well is that you have a one-tap facility. In other words, you activate the payment, you tap, and then it deactivates immediately once that transactions have gone through. Whereas if you have some of your digital watch facilities, it's almost an always-on tap function. Your credit cards are always on tap functions. And what you'll find is you have threat actors that have found ways now of being able to take transactions off your card, without a PIN number being required. And because of the fact that you might be trying to pay at a payment gateway, they could actually take off a transaction before you actually make that payment. Effectively, two payments then come off your account, and you only notice the SMS coming through, so you think it's the transaction you're trying to do legitimately, and it's actually a secondary fraudulent transaction.
Yeah, I mean, this ultimately means that the RFID chip on some of these cards then are the ones that are ultimately being cloned, if I'm then correct. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, so from a cloning perspective, what people are doing is they're actually gaining evidence of the card front and back. So there's a way of actually being able to take the credit card number, the actual expiry dates, and the CVV number that you normally get at the back of the card. And that's all it needed to perform an online transaction. So when people buy online, they can put in the credit card details and go. Some websites actually mandate an OTP or some form of verification. So if you think about some of the banks, when you do an online transaction, it will actually ask you to authorize with an OTP. But there are other sites that don't. You can literally just put some of your details in and off you go. I've even noticed in some fuel stations, especially with people traveling now the December holidays, you could literally go to a petrol station, you could fill up, and they will swipe your card. There's no signature, there's no PIN number, nothing. So if you can kind of duplicate that information and create a new card with it, you could actually do fraudulent transactions that way.
Yeah. How much does setting sort of a bank limit actually help in this case as well? That a figure above 50, 100 Rand, etc., cannot be tapped through, whether it be, whether it be the cards or even your watches, for example?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the banks these days, what they're allowing you to do is create a digital card. You can create one specifically for, let's say, Uber. You can create another one for Takealot, and you can transfer minimal funds onto those cards for those sites, right? So if you're getting an Uber ride, you can preload 150, 200 Rand on, and you can use that for your transactions. You could then load that digital card into your payment gateway on your phone if you're using, for example, a Samsung wallet, and there will never be too much money in that account. So if somebody does get the card details, they can't draw more than what's in there. I've done for myself, per se, I've created an account for any online transaction, and I put in the amount of money that I need for that, or if I'm going to a shop, so I never have more than 200 or whatever it is in the account. I think the drawback that we find with technology, though, is if you're using a digital payment system on your phone, a lot of consumers in the South African market don't always have enough data. So they'll go to the shop, they want to transfer a little bit of money onto the digital payment wallet, and then they want to go and transact, and then they run out of airtime, and they can't actually top up the facility. I think this is why people are still sticking to the old credit card system, per se.
Yeah, and we're talking about a cashless society, of course, that has gone completely into cards and now ultimately trying to go cardless as well. And it just also seems to be so worrisome. some of the other methods then to put forward here, keeping things like your PIN safe, etc., all those still apply?
Yeah, I mean, your PIN is probably your most crucial point. I think what we found is during COVID, the function of the PIN was removed on the cards because they were trying to minimize the amount of times you touched an ATM or you touched a card payment machine. And I think a lot of people need to actually put the PIN number back on regardless of what the transaction is. I still prefer, if you are going to be using a credit card, that you have to do the old insert and make sure that the cashier hands you the machine. You insert the card there, put your PIN in, and do the transaction and remove your card. There should at no point should anybody make contact with your credit card, because that's at the point where somebody could make a copy. We've seen in some restaurants where people have had a camera top and bottom near the cash register, and they literally just hold the card for 2 seconds underneath, and it takes a picture of the top and bottom of the card. There's many ways around it. The other big issue that we've seen recently as well is insider help from employers in banks giving information to threat actors. So keeping your PIN safe, keeping your card on you at all times is very crucial to kind of stop this kind of fraud. Having said that, there are ways of going to the bank and getting your money back. You can log a case of fraud at the bank, but again, it takes quite a long time to get your money back. You can't sit 6 months waiting for that money to be returned to you.
Yeah, I was about to actually ask as well, because that becomes very, very important too. I mean, in terms of if you do have something like this, let's just talk about what you've just said there, which is the ability to perhaps get your money back a little bit. Fraud prevention services, how many of those services are you able to use? There was also the National Fraud Prevention Services, which actually allows you to, if any debt is sort of called out in your name, they first have to go through that methodology, etc. What are the ways, methods, and means that people should be aware of?
So I think if you start watching what the banks are doing to mitigate fraud, there's a lot of things that are quite interesting. If you look at the banking app, I've seen now some of the banks actually, when you're on a phone to the bank, they'll actually say, is this call with a legitimate person at the bank, right? Some of the banks take it one step further. If you phone the bank or the bank phones you, on your actual banking app, it will tell you who that call center agent is. If it's a fraudulent person pretending to be the bank, it won't show that up in your app, and then you'll know it's not a legitimate bank person that's calling you. But the thing is, the information that the banks are getting, or the threat actors are getting from banks, is so detailed that it almost tricks you into believing that it is somebody from the bank. But they will never ask you for your PIN verbally over the phone. Normally what they'll do is they'll divert you through to some kind of electronic system, and they'll say, do some form of verification. I hate the verification via PIN. It should be some kind of, the challenge with a 1 to accept or 2 to decline. The old USSD method, so that it's actually coming from the bank. But yeah, you should never give your PIN number out to anyone. Rather go into the branch if you're not certain who it is that's transacting with you on the phone.
Yeah, a lot to be aware of, especially then at this time. I hope that a lot more people are actually watching as well, particularly during the festive season. Richard, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope a lot more of our viewers are actually getting themselves aware, especially as they go out on holiday. Richard Frost, Armata CyberSecurity's Head of Consulting.